Hi students, this is Mary Richardson. I'm going to be your instructor for this summer course. If you haven't done so already, please watch the introductory videos. And if you've already done that, you're in the right place. I'm going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 1, an Introduction to Biology. So with these lecture segments, I'm going to record in 15-minute segments, at least for now, until I break down and upgrade and actually purchase the software that will allow me to do more than that. But it also makes it kind of more manageable for you, the student, just watching 15-minute segments. I know that when I was taking an online class, 15 to 25 minutes was about all I could handle until I had to get up and go take a break. So I hope that you will find these lecture segments enjoyable and interesting and also manageable. What I like about online lectures is, of course, you can pause at any time and go back if you want to take notes. So if you miss something, you don't have to raise your hand in class. You can just pause and go back and listen again. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 1, which is an introduction to biology. And what I'm going to do with this lecture is just give you an overview of everything that we're going to be covering during these 5 weeks. So it's basically the tip of the iceberg. We're going to go for breadth, not depth, in this first lecture. Okay, so for Chapter 1, the learning outcomes, we're going to define what biology is, which includes the properties of life as well as the scope of life. We're going to cover a definition of evolution, and we're also going to cover the process of science, so the scientific method. Okay, so we are living in what some might consider a golden age of biology. Our technological advances are really incredible at this point in time, and the internet has made it really accessible for students everywhere to easily research things online, to find research articles online, as well as popular science articles. So all of these headlines here, these would be considered popular science sources. And they are found in magazines, both online and in print, on all sorts of blogs, and other sources. But these would be considered popular science sources. So they're not original research articles, but oftentimes they will cite or reference original research articles. So when you read something like this, it will often say something to the effect of, a new study has been published in, and then it will name the journal, and it will usually tell you a bit about the major findings of the study, as well as the authors, and put it into context. So most people are familiar with popular science articles, not so much with original research articles. But I'm going to introduce you to original research articles this semester, just to help you gain a better understanding of how research is conducted. And that will give you a really good understanding of how to interpret scientific articles and also how to look things up online that you want to know more about. Anyway, so you've probably all seen articles such as these talking about genetics, fossils, DNA, conservation practices in forestry and wildlife science. So biology is really woven into the fabric of society as never before, just because we live in the age of the internet and news travels very fast. And of course, up until this point, we've never known as much as we have about science. Our scientific body of knowledge is constantly growing. So what is biology exactly? Well, biology is just the scientific study of life. Remember, bio means life, ology is the study of, and life is structured on a scale ranging from the molecular to the global. So we can study science at the molecular level, at the level of individual molecules, like DNA molecules, and we can also study biology at the global level. So people that study the biosphere and atmospheric science are also biologists. And biology's scope stretches across the enormous diversity of life on Earth. Everything from individual bacterial cells up to the largest plants and animals and the ecosystems that support those organisms. So what exactly is life? What makes life different from non-living entities? Well, one of the properties of life is order. All living things exhibit some form of order or organization. And that's apparent in this picture. This Douglas fir tree here has an ordered structure. So order in a lot of cases helps us to identify species. So characteristics of a species are going to help us identify it, and identifying is of course the first step in learning more about that organism. So the way these pine cones are arranged on the tree, the way the scales on the individual pine cones are ordered around that cone, the way the branches themselves are arranged along the trunk, all of these properties could be considered properties of that organism's order. Regulation is another property of life. So it's just adjusting internal environment to maintain stability. All living things regulate life in some manner. And reptiles and amphibians are a great example of that. We all know that reptiles and amphibians are what are referred to as cold-blooded or ectothermic. They need to rely on warmth from their environment in order to regulate their internal environment. So this box turtle here is a local box turtle, photographed right outside Bowling Green actually, and it is basking in the sun while also staying close to water, because that is a major escape mechanism for them from predators, and they find a lot of their food in bodies of water. So box turtles, a great example of a living organism regulating themselves. Growth and development. This just means organisms grow from the time that they arise, whether it be from another cell or from sexually reproducing organisms, and they develop. So over time, organisms change in appearance. They generally get larger. This maple tree, for example, is very young and it's just starting out life on a forest floor. Instructions for this process are regulated by DNA. So DNA really provides the blueprints for an entire organism. And depending on where that organism is in its developmental scheme, certain genes are activated or deactivated appropriately. Energy processing. All organisms must take in energy to function, whether it be the plants in these two pictures or this butterfly that is feeding directly from a plant, the giraffe that was killed by this pride of lions here also consumed energy directly from plant life, and of course the lion is consuming its energy from the giraffe meat. So all organisms have to take in energy. Response to the environment. So all organisms react to stimuli in some way. Again, reptiles and amphibians. Amphibians, in the case of this newt, a great example of response to the environment. When it's very cold out, they move more slowly because they don't have a very active metabolism. They need some degree of warmth from the environment to be able to move very fast at all. And of course, these daffodils here are going to bloom at a certain time each year in the early spring, and they're going to orient the blades here of the leaves towards the sun so that those leaves can go through photosynthesis and provide the plant with energy. So all organisms respond to the environment in some way. Reproduction, this is another requirement for life. Of course, it must continue, or it must occur for life to continue. And again, the two main means of reproduction are asexual and sexual reproduction. Both of the pictures here are examples of sexual reproduction. Birds and cows reproduce sexually. Finally, evolution is also one of the properties of life. So variation in individuals leads to changes in populations over time. This is the unifying theme in biology. So individual organisms, note that they may change over time, but they don't evolve in the strict sense of the word. So it's a population that's the smallest biological unit that's capable of evolving. An individual cannot evolve, but a population of individuals of the same species can evolve. Again, life can be considered from a global to cellular scale. The biosphere includes all of the environments on Earth that support life. So you can look at life on a very grand scale from the point of view of the biosphere. You can take that down to ecosystems, communities, populations, etc., all the way to an individual cell, an organelle of a cell, and molecules and atoms within those organelles. An ecosystem is all the living organisms in a specific area, along with all the non-living, also known as abiotic factors with which they interact. So this giraffe here is one component of an ecosystem. The biotic components of that ecosystem are the animals, trees, shrubs, and grasses, bacteria, and fungi. All of those components of an ecosystem are living organisms. But then, of course, there are also abiotic factors that influence what organisms are able to live there and what organisms are unable to live there. So, for example, air, water, and soil, those are going to influence conditions in that ecosystem. So ecology is the branch of biology that investigates the relationships between organisms and their environment. And we will cover an introduction to ecology at the very end of the semester. The dynamics of any ecosystem are going to depend on two processes. One of those is the cycling of nutrients, and the other is the flow of energy through the ecosystem. So energy flows through the ecosystem. It's not recycled. There's a constant input from the sun, whereas nutrients cycle through the ecosystem. So nutrients can actually be recycled, but energy constantly flows. The cell is the lowest level of structure that can perform all activities required for life. So all organisms are composed of cells, whether that's a mushroom, a plant, or an animal, and all cells arrive from previously existing cells. These two statements together make up the concept known as cell theory. And we can distinguish two major types of cells. The prokaryotic cell, which means technically before the nucleus. Pro is before or first. And then eukaryotic cells, which means true nucleus. So we have here a depiction of a prokaryotic cell, typically much smaller and simpler, and then a depiction of a typical eukaryotic cell. And I've just about reached that 15-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here and pick up with the next lecture segment.